guys, so that wraps up Season 6 of Mamemeister's High Score Kerfuffle, and our final game of the season was a good one from my perspective, maybe less so for others. That was Blockout, a 3D Tetris game released by Technos in 1989. I love a puzzle game, and this one is fairly different to many other ones. Most, I would say, use a 2D view, whereas the 3D here requires a slightly different skill set, and it does make the controls fairly complex. You have 3 buttons for rotating around each axis, and another to drop the block. Getting on top of these is a significant part of the challenge, and I often found myself rotating things in the wrong direction. As a package though, I think they have done about as well as they could do with the concept and the technology available at the time. The game is smooth and nicely presented, but if you don't like the concept, it's never going to appeal. For me though, I love playing it. A good level of challenge, and for the most part, I find it fairly relaxing, apart from when it gets a bit trickier further into the game. I thought about featuring a home version again, but there are quite a few, and this isn't one that Alan has done an arcade perfect on, and he might do one in the future. If not, I'm sure I could do something too. So for the last time this season, let's take a look at the scores. We had 13 scores this week, which is a bit of a drop, but puzzle games can put people off. It certainly was competitive at the top though. Man Cave Arcade has his best finish of the season in 10th. Colin's just ahead after streaming this as usual. Paul didn't really get on with this game, but he's exceeded his expectations with 8th place and 50,000 points. Next is Graham, who might not have played if it wasn't for Juffa making some progress up the table, and it turned out he enjoyed it more than he was expecting. Mark is just ahead, and then it's Milthy, who was the first into the 100,000s in 5th. Juffa did put in a great effort this week, with the outside chance he could take the season win, but he's pipped to the podium place by My Retro Tech, who continues his excellent finish to the season in 3rd. Robert is also a fan of this game, and did set the score to beat, but ultimately he's finished in 2nd. But taking this week's win, and the only person to beat the challenging level 15, is me. This is my first win of the season, and I mentioned last week this was my sort of game, and I did feel like I got on top of it, with the controls becoming more instinctive, which is key when the game gets faster with more challenging shapes of block. Here is the distribution of the scores. KMA's token submission is on the left, and then we have a bit of a grouping in the middle, with scores between 40 and 70,000. Like last week, we have 4 people in the top bin, showing there wasn't that much that separated the top scores, with a few people stuck on level 15, and only me getting ahead, but not by much. And now the difficulty curve. Like the distribution, we have a jump up from KMA, and then a somewhat linear increase to the top. There's a little plateau at 70,000, and then another at 140,000, corresponding to getting to level 15. At the top, there is a little jump up to me, showing it was close at the top, but my score was slightly ahead of the previous 3. And finally, the progress over the week. Bob took an early lead, but didn't come back to the game. Robert then took the lead before My Retro Tech pushed things on again. Robert was then the first to push scores over 100,000, but failed to improve much beyond that. Towards the end of the week, it was me taking the lead, which no one was then able to match. I made many improvements over the week as I gradually got better and very much enjoyed playing. A few others you can see making multiple improvements too, including Milthy, who enjoyed the game very much as well. With this being the final game, here are the final standings of the season. We've had a fair amount of movement, and it's all in the top 10. Finishing in 10th is Milthy, whose best performance came in kicks and iRobot. Mark is in 9th and has been consistently in the lower half of the top 10. In 8th, and dropping down 2, is Leagsy. His best game came with his 2nd place in Bubbles. In 7th, and getting ahead of Leagsy, is Colin, who took his first ever win this season and then followed it up with another, in both Xerion and iRobot. In 6th is KMA, who won Flying Shark and took a couple of 2nd places too. Paul was in 3rd last week, but has dropped to 5th in the final table. His stand-up performance was the win for kicks in week 2. In 4th, and jumping up 3 places from last week, is Robert. He's had a great run into the finish and took the win in last week's rubbish Twin Eagle. Our top 3 are exactly the same as last season though. I'm up 2 after the win this week to get the final podium spot. I had led early on after taking 2nd in the first 2 games and nearly won kicks. Taking a solid 2nd is Big Juffa, who benefited from our run of 4 shmups in the second half of the season taking wins in X-Dexes and in Slapfight. But this season's winner, once again, is Graham. He took 2 early wins in Balloon Bomber and Bubbles and has been consistently highly placed all season. This is also the first season he's played every game, and he's needed it with the competition from Juff. Well done to Graham, and he is Mamemeister's High Score Kerfuffle Season 6 champion. So since we've not heard from Sick Boy for the last 2 seasons, it's Graham who's been the one to beat, and that's now back-to-back season wins for him. I offered him a Champion's Choice, and he's gone for Hypersports, released by Konami in 1984. This is a multi-event game, where you compete in each round, requiring certain timings, combinations, or rapid presses of the buttons. This is a classic, and I'm glad it's come up in the slightly less competitive break between seasons, due to variations in hardware people are using, which may give an advantage. Autofire is obviously not allowed, and we'll be playing a single round of all the events. This should be a good bit of fun between seasons, but be careful not to cause yourself any injuries. Hammering buttons is not good for anyone's hands or wrists. I had a quick play of this, and it's really not my sort of thing, but I can see the appeal. Let's see how everyone gets on. Now, let me describe what we'll be doing for Season 7. I think this season has worked pretty well, working our way through the 80s, and I think the sensible thing to do would be to keep it going into the 90s. So what I'd like from each of you is a suggestion of a game from 1990, and we'll continue with the random selection as before. As games begin to get more complex throughout the 90s, can I suggest that we try to stick to sprite-based games? Or possibly polygon games that are known to run well, so it's fair for everyone taking part. I'm expecting Capcom CPS1 and 2 to feature heavily this season, especially with the new Mr. Cores. Can I also have your best and worst games of this season? So have a bit of fun playing Hypersports this week, and I'll be back to kick off the new season next week. See you then.